It's time for Supply Chain Now, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Heard around the world, Supply Chain Now spotlights the best in all things supply chain, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Good morning, Scott Luton here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome back to the show. On today's episode, we are continuing our Logistics with Purpose series here, powered by our dear friends over at Vector Global Logistics. On this series, as you may know, we spotlight leaders and organizations that are all on a noble mission and are changing the world in one way, shape, or form. So stay tuned as we look to increase your supply chain leadership IQ. Quick programming note before we get started. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. I want to welcome in my fearless, esteemed co-host here on today's show, Enrique Alvarez, Managing Director with Vector Global Logistics. Good morning, Enrique.
Good morning, Scott. Good morning, Randy. Monica, pleasure to be here with you guys today.
Great to have you back here on the heels of a fascinating conversation we had with Mickey over at Rise Against Hunger. And as you mentioned, you're joined by your colleague, Monica Rush, Business Development Associate with Vector. Good morning, Monica.
Good morning, Scott. It's really nice to be here again.
Absolutely. We love this series. There's so much passion and purpose and leadership best practices that have come out of these conversations. It's just one of our most enjoyable series on the Supply Chain Now's team. So with all that being said, I want to welcome in our featured guest here today, Randy Strang, Chief Operating Officer with Medshare, which is a global humanitarian aid organization that happens to be headquartered in Atlanta. Good morning, Randy.
Good morning, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here. In fact, it's an honor to be here.
Well, so glad that I know that your team continues to push forward and deliver on your mission. So thanks so much for taking some time out to join us and fill us in on what Medshare is doing, as well as some of your thought leadership on the supply chain industry. Great. So Randy, with all that said, as with all of our series, we really like to get a snapshot of who our guests are. So up front, tell us a little about yourself. Where you're from. Maybe give us a story or two from your upbringing.
All right. Well, first of all, I gotta apologize to any Michigan fans online because I am a Buckeye. I grew up in Ohio. I did go to Ohio State. In fact, I'm second generation Ohio State. My father went to school there too. I grew up in obviously Ohio and Cincinnati, Ohio, where my father was he's a director of product development at Procter & Gamble's. He's a PhD in chemical engineering, so we got to enjoy all kinds of test foods and test products. He'd bring home all kinds of crazy things. Pringles, like years before they were ever produced, he was bringing home potato chips. So we got to try all kinds of fun things. But so yeah, Ohio State. Go ahead.
Growing up in Cincinnati, Randy, I'm sure Skyline chili and some of those other Cincinnati chilies was part of your diet as well, right?
Absolutely part of my diet. Yeah, it still is. You can buy it here in Atlanta if you look hard enough. So yeah, it's a wonderful thing. And every time I travel up there, I make it a point to visit Skyline, visit Montgomery Inn for those who know of those places, favorite spots. So yeah, like I said, Ohio State studied industrial engineering. And I really purposely chose industrial engineering. Some people joke and call it imaginary, but I happen to think it's one of the most important engineering disciplines because it's a discipline of people and processes, which to me are really the things that make the world go around. So I've always been fascinated by human engagement and processes and how people work together to make things happen.
Well, Randy, that's an important note because despite all the technology that is in the industry these days and certainly is in supply chain, it still takes people working together to solve problems and innovate, drive new products, you name it. A lot of what your dad was doing at P&G, it sounded like.
Well, yeah, except with people.
That's right.
Yeah, that's really what I enjoyed. I was lucky when I was there at school. I had an opportunity to co-op and I actually worked at a diamond plant. So, which, I always like to tell people, but it was an industrial abrasives plant. It was a General Electric had a business unit that produced industrial diamonds, and I get to learn all about the fairly complex process of making diamonds. So that was a lot of fun, a lot of really hands-on manufacturing experience, and it wasn't an automated process. There was a lot of human interaction that went on there. So I learned quite a bit as a student, and it was a great opportunity while I was there. And so, one of my first jobs out of school was, believe it or not, I went to work for a Michigan graduate. You never think that, but no, my first boss was a graduate from the University of Michigan, and he actually went to work in Texas. I moved down to Texas. Always wanted to live in the South. Moved to Houston and worked in the pulp and paper industry. So I was an engineer in the paper mill for about 5 years. Learned a lot about paper making. Funny story about that. One of the things I preferred to do in order to learn the process was to work, it was a 24-hour operation, so I'd work the graveyard shift. I'd come in and spend several weeks at a time, getting to know the guys that worked on the graveyard shift. And to me, that was how you learned how to make paper. And you work with these guys that had been there most of their career. And they used to send me on wild goose chases around the mill, teaching me and teasing me about, being a green bean and, learning. We had a fun time. They'd tell me to trace a line, a feedstock line around the mill. And when I'd come back and say, well, here I followed it all over the place, and it turned out to be a dead line, it was shut off, and they laughed.
Well, Randy,
it took 2 hours to figure that out.
Randy, I tell you, I think I've been over 300 plant tours in my career, and I love the plant floor. I love the people that make supply chain happen, but certainly make manufacturing sites happen. Salt of the earth people, and that's so important right now with what we're facing. I want to bring Monica in. Monica, as we've kind of taken a few steps with Randy into his career, I know you've got an interesting question around his professional journey, right?
Yes, Scott, thank you. So, Randy, it's so nice to have you here today and to get to know you a little better. I wanted to ask you about your professional journey. What roles were critical to shaping your worldview?
Good morning, Monica. Sure. So I feel very lucky in my career. I've had a lot of different opportunities. I mentioned, moving in Texas and working in the paper industry. In the paper industry, I learned a lot about technology. In fact, I got very involved in the paper making technology. And from there, I had an opportunity. I met a mentor in that phase of my career, and I actually followed that mentor through a good part of my career. And I learned an awful lot from that person, and I highly recommend for those who are listening, if you can be a mentor to a young person, find an opportunity to do it. If you're a young person, find a good mentor that's willing to take you under their wing, so to speak, and because it was immensely beneficial to me. But so I had an opportunity in the paper industry, and from there I got into consulting. I was actually I joined Accenture. Back then it was Anderson Consulting, and had an opportunity to really get into solving problems of unimaginable different varieties. Here I'd been in my career focused on, a fairly narrow set of business processes, and all of a sudden I'm thrown into a world where you were often hit with problems that you had no idea how to solve. You had to figure it out as you go. And one of the things I learned there was build your network, because that's how you're going to be able to truly solve problems, is build the network of people you can rely on, you can trust, and you can reach out to when you need help. And that's one of the things I learned at Accenture. It's part of their culture, is you establish and leverage that network to solve problems, because two minds are always better than one, and a whole network of minds that work together is just phenomenal.
Randy, along those lines, and couldn't agree with you more, and the name escapes me who coined this phrase, but dig your well before you're thirsty, right, as it applies to networking. Because you're definitely going to need people. You're going to definitely need more minds as you solve problems and navigate through your journey. But, you know, that's tough to build the network when you need it. You need to build it, as you're alluding to, before. Be proactive about it, right?
Exactly. You need to have that network, because you don't know, you're always going to be hit with unexpected challenges. And it's when you get hit with those unexpected challenges that you need to reach out to others who may have solved them before. And that's where you can truly innovate, in fact, because that's where innovation comes from, right? Is trial and error. And by having a good network you can trust and reach out to, you get to benefit from all those trials and errors that other people experienced in order to better innovate and better solve problems. So I had an opportunity to work in that environment, and that's where I kind of expanded out beyond just the pulp and paper industry. I got into lots of different business environments, most of them process industry related, but simply because that was where my background was at the time. But I then, through my mentor, had an opportunity to experience another culture, another firm. I had a period of time I went to work for Ernst & Young. I went from Accenture to Ernst & Young and their supply chain practice. And that's where I really started to get more involved in, different industries, much broader array of industry challenges. I got involved in retail, consumer products, you name it, all kinds of different fun challenges that I got involved with there. And again, it was through my mentor that I was introduced to the firm. He was asked to join the firm, and I advanced through E&Y. And then it was at E&Y where I had an opportunity to join UPS. And to me, it was it was a perfect fit. Something about my personality fit pretty well into UPS's culture, which is a pretty rich culture. But I came in at a fairly senior level at UPS, which was unusual. Most people at my level had been at the company for 25 or more years. So my peers had very different backgrounds than I did. And I tell you, the people and the culture, at UPS we call it the partnership culture, is truly remarkable. There's a level of trust and reliance on your partner within that business that is, in my experience, working with lots of different clients is unusual and unique.
Right.
And,
UPS, the founder, coined this phrase, constructive dissatisfaction.
Yep.
And that's always stuck between my ears. Randy, you being, I've never worked with UPS, you being a part of that culture, in your words, what does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, and I use that every day. It's constructive dissatisfaction is you should never be, here's my interpretation of it anyway, you should never be completely satisfied with the status quo. There's always a better way, a different way to do things. And it's not a matter of just being dissatisfied. You have to bring a solution. You have to be constructive in improving the process and improving how you get things done. So to me, that's the definition of constructive dissatisfaction. Never be satisfied with where you are. Always strive to improve and do better.
Absolutely. And that's in the infamous words of Jim Casey, the founder of UPS. And I got to tell you, that's a big part of the culture over at Vector. Being actively and consistently and constantly dissatisfied with the current state. And that's what I love about this series, and I love about a lot of the initiatives that Enrique and his team are leading. So Randy, and I don't want to short circuit us here, but what was, just prior to your current role, what was the role that kind of leapt you into your current role with Medshare?
Okay. So one of the questions too, and I'll go back and I'll kind of blend the answer into the two of them. One was, what is something that shaped your global view? And there was a situation that I was faced with at UPS. Now, it was during peak, and as you probably know, life at UPS changes very dramatically during peak.
Right. And to our audience, just to we may have some folks that are new to supply chain or still in school. So peak usually is the run-up, the lead-in to the holidays, right? The November and December holidays. And then, of course, peak continues for many that are in the returns business in January,
Yes.
right? When all the stuff is unfortunately going back to some of the retailers. So it's a busy time of year, as you put it, Randy.
Yeah, there's two seasons. There's peak and there's planning for peak. So we had just kind of launched into peak, which I believe this was I don't know, November. It was right before Black Friday. In fact, it might have been that weekend. It may have been after Black Friday. Anyway, we had regular calls. It was pretty much a 7-day-a-week process, and I had at the time had a group called Customer Program Management. And what we did in that organization, it was a global organization, is we provided essential oversight to the UPS business units to make sure they were delivering on what we committed to those customers. So I'll quickly get to the point here, but so I get a call at about 7 in the morning from our somebody on the management committee, EVP on the management committee, that basically said, hey, we're having some real challenges, and with healthcare, we need to establish a war room today. So we scrambled. And Enrique Rob Marsh was part of this whole process. We gathered, again, you rely on your network and you're glad you have it when you need it. So I started making phone calls, and we pulled together a group. The focus here was to improve the delivery performance of critical healthcare supplies. And if you can imagine a busy highway and you have one car that needs to get through, if the highway is just jammed, it's going to be very difficult for that one car to get through. And that's the same thing with packages. The critical healthcare packages are things that are life-saving. These are medications or medical devices that have to get where they're going on time. And in peak, the highways are crowded, the facilities are full, and it wasn't happening the way it should have at the time. So this group scrambled to triage and resolve that. And one of the things, in terms of shaping my view, and one of the things that truly led me to where I am today at Medshare was, the I don't know, maybe obvious to many, but the critical nature of global health and of healthcare to people that need things, and how the supply chain is so integral to healthcare functioning properly. I mean, what UPS was facing was how do we get that that one medication that needs to be given to a patient at a certain time so that they're ready for surgery that's been scheduled. And we would actually courier a small box in a chartered airplane, across country if we had to make that happen. It was that type of extreme, do whatever needs done process that we put together. And we had 30 people in a room. We had 125, I think, people scattered all over the country in facilities working 24 hours a day. I mean, we were shifts, obviously, but it was a very intense process. And one of the things that was really, I don't know what to call it, a slap in the face, if you will, kind of an awakening for me is
Right.
How critical supply chain and healthcare are together. What we do at Medshare obviously is critical to global health.
Right.
We're fulfilling a need that's overlooked. It's just so difficult for some communities, some organizations, some countries to get what we often take for granted here in the United States. In fact, recently with COVID-19, we're starting not to realize how critical PPE is.
Right.
Well, this is a situation countries all over the world have been in for years.
Well, let's pivot on that. That's a great segue. But before we do, because we want to make sure our audience knows exactly what Medshare does, and hopefully maybe we'll find some new supporters. But I think it's a critical point you just made, and I think it's one of the silver linings of this pandemic environment we're in, where I think there'll be a new appreciation for not only healthcare and folks on the front line and folks literally saving lives, but also right beside that, there'll be a new appreciation and understanding of what end-to-end supply chain folks do.
Sure.
And that's good for everybody, right? These are, you got people that are saving lives and putting themselves at risk in hospitals and doctor's offices, and you name it. And then on the flip side, you got people putting themselves at risk to keep product on shelves and to protect that psyche that's so important during challenging times. So a great point you made, Randy, and want to make sure that we double down on that. So with all of that said, you started to kind of share the mission that Medshare has been on. Let's talk more about that. So what does Medshare do?
Great. No, what we do is we collect high-quality surplus medical supplies and equipment, and then we donate them to underserved communities in both the U.S. and all over the world. By doing that, we actually divert about 2 million pounds a year of what would otherwise go to landfills. So
wow.
We're diverting perfectly good, high-quality medical supplies and equipment, and we're repurposing them where they're most needed around the world. So we serve, I'll give you some numbers here just to give you an idea of the magnitude. We were founded in 1998. We've delivered about $240 million worth of supplies since then, 105 different countries, and we've served 22 million patients in those years. So it's a tremendous need that exists out there, and we're just a tip of the iceberg in terms of the need. It's almost an infinite demand for what exists, in terms of need in the health, the global health.
Right. But you're making such a huge impact. That may be just the tip of the iceberg, but that's a big tip. I mean, you are doing the good Lord's work and helping people. 22 million patients. And you said it was founded, was it 1998 or 1988?
1998, sorry.
1998, okay. Wow, that is a ton of good work in, less than 25 years' time.
Yep.
So I'm going to go back to, and we love our numbers here, 240 million, 105 countries, 22 million patients. But what you said up front about how you're redirecting supplies that otherwise would just add to our landfills.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the circularity that's baked into your model.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's shocking when you see the quality that comes as excess from our hospitals. I mean, these are donated supplies. We get them from hospitals. We get them from corporate donors. So a lot of times there's, a product change, and now all the hospitals want the newer product. So we tend to get the surplus older product. On equipment, we get hospitals are constantly upgrading their diagnostic equipment, their treatment equipment, and we get, whenever they upgrade, we will get frequently donated the used equipment. We refurbish it. We have 3 facilities in the U.S., one here in Atlanta. This is our headquarters. We have a facility of equal size in the San Francisco Bay Area, and then we have a small facility, more of a collection point, up in the New York City area in Secaucus, New Jersey. So we'll collect the equipment and supplies. We refurbish the equipment. We use WHO guidelines in terms of both supplies and equipment. All the supplies have at least a year of expiry left, so it's at least a year before they expire. We don't take anything that's expired.
I think I think a lot of our audience will certainly appreciate and use a lot of refurbished, remanufactured equipment. And for folks in our audience that may not be tapping into that stream, as Randy's pointing out, there's so much product, great product, that is either returned and is just simply destroyed because it never makes it back on the shelf, or is destroyed for other reasons. There's so much great quality products in that part of global supply chain, right, Randy?
Right. It's amazing what we do get, and it's amazing the relationships we developed with hospitals and manufacturers too.
Yep.
They've been incredibly supportive of our mission.
Love that. I've told this, I've worn this story out. I'm probably beating a dead horse, but I've been using a remanufactured printer for about 7 years, and it just now, I think, gave up the ghost. So I think we're going to have to put it out of its misery. But 7 years of a printer that was rebuilt, right?
Yeah.
So there's so much good quality, and hopefully we continue as supply chain leaders to find ways of baking more and more circularity into the global supply chain.
So
go ahead.
Let me just add another dimension to this, because you talk about the equipment. One of the challenges that we also see and fulfill is we'll send this equipment, this biomedical equipment, to countries and hospitals around the world. We also train their engineers and technicians on how to repair and maintain them. You'd be shocked at how often we see equipment in the field, didn't come from us, that just sits there in a closet because it broke and they don't have anybody to fix it. Or they don't even know how to use it. It was delivered to them as a donation, but they don't know how to use it. So they push it in a closet because they've got more pressing matters. So one of the things we do, and just in fiscal year 19, which we're about 6 months off, so we just finished fiscal year 19, is we trained 382 engineers around the world.
Wow.
So it's not a light operation. We have an engineer who spends about half his time traveling, and we pack as much into these trips as possible. In fact, right now he's working with the State Department to try to get home from Nigeria.
So you're kind of effectively teaching them how to fish, right? Not just providing fish, but also teaching them how to fish in some respect.
Exactly. Yeah, how to maintain this equipment so they can continue to use that equipment to support patients that need it.
Love that.
Yeah, the supplies. We receive these supplies, and they need. There's a lot of work that goes into preparing them for delivery, and that we have to do a QA on them. We have to sort them. We have to repackage them, and we use volunteers for that. We see amongst our 3 facilities, we see about 20,000 volunteers a year. And
so let me I want to bring Enrique into the conversation, not for the question he's got for you, but I want to kind of put Enrique on the spot here. Enrique, I know you've collaborated with Medshare for quite some time. What do you admire about the operation that Randy has been describing to our listeners?
Yes, thank you very much, Scott. And Randy, once again, I've told this to you before, we really admire what you and your company and your organization is doing, and we're really proud to just have known you guys and have the opportunity to work with you. You were talking about the volunteers and how the sorting operation works, and we've done that as a company a couple of times, and it's just,
thank you.
It's unbelievable. It's just not only impressive to see, because I think that Randy already described it a couple of times, but it's hard to imagine how much surplus gets to their warehouse, right? Even again, Randy has mentioned it again and again, but until you're there at the warehouse, looking at all those rows and boxes and plastic bags, and it's really mind-boggling. And they all come together mixed up, and you have this huge plastic bags that you put on the tables, and teams work maybe 5 per table, trying to sort every single thing, and it's just impressive. It's amazing. So I admire their dedication and commitment, because it's painstakingly slow to kind of really break everything apart and put like the gauzes at one end, the mask at one end, this and that.
Yeah.
So it's very complicated. It's time consuming, and honestly, I just admire the way they have been able to build the foundation of followers and volunteers and people that believe in their cause and what they stand for. So if I had to kind of single one thing out from things that I admire about Medshare, it's just the foundation and the amazing community that they have built throughout the world, because it's not an easy job. I'll tell you that much.
Enrique, you're kind. We try really hard to make it a great experience for the volunteers. We want to engage them in the mission. We want them to feel, while they're here, they're really adding value. They're really doing good while they're here, and hopefully when they leave, they feel like they've really accomplished something, and they have. We at the end of each session, we let them know how many pounds they sorted, how many patients will receive that, where those products are going to go. So when they leave, they know, hey, what I did is going to go to Kenya. What I did is going to go to Ethiopia. It's going to support, X thousands of patients. So
love that.
Well, yeah. And they and Randy might not say it, but Randy and his team run a tight ship. They have all the steps, all the processes. They're very professional, good technology. It's a really well established operation for sure.
Love that. So Randy, let's talk about that for a second. So, I think in all of our conversations, a lot of folks will assume where CEOs or COOs or you name it spend their time. And as we have found, there's so much variety. So where, in your role as Chief Operating Officer of Medshare, where do you spend your time?
Well, and that's a great question. I thought a lot about this. I spent a lot of time, obviously trying to make this place more efficient, find ways to get more done at a lower cost, more done with the people that we have, both our staff and our volunteers. I work hard and thinking a lot about how do we make that volunteer program a great experience for everyone. So we do work hard at that. We think a lot about it. We don't have a lot of technology here. We have what we need. We could always use more. So there's a lot of time and thought goes into, what is the best way to leverage the funds that we have and the talent that we have to innovate and to do things more creatively and better, leveraging technology or just leveraging a smarter way of doing things. So that's probably the biggest focus that I have every day when I come in. And every night when I go home, I'm thinking about, what else can we be doing and how could we be doing it smarter and better?
Love that. Constructive dissatisfaction and driving that innovation and continuous improvement process forward. Okay, Enrique, I want to bring you back in. You're always curious about what else is between our guests' ears. So please fire away.
Sure. Thank you much. And so Randy, you mentioned that you're constantly thinking about how to do things, how to improve the processes, how to just create more. And I guess one of the questions that I had for you today was, what has changed? I know that many things have changed with this coronavirus pandemic that we're facing, but as a COO and someone that has had an amazing career from consulting to UPS to manufacturing, what can you tell us about the things that you're kind of seeing in the market now, the things that are actually making your work a lot more stressful, maybe a lot harder, but then also what are some of the silver linings that you see that could give us some hope to everyone else and some other organizations like yours that are really trying and funded on helping others, but yet they're now facing this additional kind of hurdle, right, to their cause and their purpose, and you can't stop, because if you stop now is when people need you even more than before, but you're faced with this incredible challenge. So how do you cope with all that? How do you think around this?
That's a great question, Enrique. So some of the things that we've faced, we were very focused on working with countries, taking the surplus that we have here, that we enjoy here in the United States, and using that surplus in communities around the world. So that was our key focus. Now we also support local clinics. That was a small part of what we do, an important part of what we do, but it wasn't the major part of where our focus was. And then all of a sudden, somewhere mid-March, it did a 180 on it. So it just completely turned around. And all of a sudden, we're getting calls from local hospitals saying, we need gloves, we need gowns, we need masks, face shields, can you help us? And all of a sudden, we're completely spun around. Now we're providing whatever inventory we have to hospitals and clinics in our communities, in the San Francisco Bay Area and in the Atlanta area and up in New York City. So it's been a 180. And I'll tell you, one of the things that we've enjoyed there is we do have a good network of partners. We were blessed with a pretty good inventory of personal protective equipment. We were able to, when the outbreak initially occurred, we were able to deliver needed supplies to China. And then when now the rest of the world began to experience in a far worse way in many aspects, the impact of this pandemic, we were fortunate to have inventory to be able to continue to supply hospitals and organizations here in the States. So it's been a 180 in terms of our business model. We did lose, we no longer see volunteers. We've put that on hold. So our staff has been busy. We've got an amazing, dedicated group of people here that are, I tell you, they're just amazing, and how they're focused on the mission and how they're able to do what they do every day. So we've been able to continue to provide that support.
Randy, in light of kind of the changes we've all had to make from a volunteer standpoint with physical distancing and all that, quick question: How can our listeners support Medshare right now? What would you suggest?
Well, first of all, you're welcome to come out to our website and learn more about what we do. We're at www.medshare.org. You can also, see us on Facebook at Medshare Mission. Instagram is at Medshare Official, and Twitter we're at Medshare. So we're pretty active in social media. If we are looking at bringing volunteers back this summer, we're starting to book in July volunteer sessions. We're hoping, we've got our fingers crossed, that we'll be in a position to be able to reopen to some volunteers, smaller groups, but we're open to that.
And these are great. So when you talk about planning these volunteer sessions, this would be a great opportunity for teams to come out and support what you do. And I imagine, I've never been a part of a Medshare volunteer activity, but I imagine it's also a great team building and esprit de corps building opportunity, as well as doing good things, helping to support a great organization, right?
They are. I'll jump in because I've been on that end of the spectrum, and they're really, really great team builders. And I think they do a really good job to follow up with what you're doing, because you're not just spending a couple of hours and that's it, but you really get a sense of the impact that what you're doing is going to have in some other people's lives. And I think that's what kind of closes the loop and makes it more meaningful. And I think it's a really, really good activity for teams. We've done it a couple of times already, and I'm sure we'll continue to do it, because as much as we feel we're helping Medshare, I really think it's the other way around. And every time we go there, we come out like just so much more energized, more focused, and I think it's just Medshare helping us every time we go. So we'll keep doing that.
It's good. Love that. Yeah, it's great to hear that, Enrique.
So let's shift gears one more time here. That's what we do. There's so much to cover in an hour or less. Let's shift over to what else is going on across the global end-to-end supply chain, right? Enrique, I want you to weigh in here in a second. But Randy, when you survey this pandemic environment we're in, what topic or two or development or you name it, what are you tracking more than others right now?
Well, one of the things I'd say one of the things we're tracking right now and we're involved with on a daily basis is just some of the challenges of moving freight globally. It's always something, I'm sure, Enrique, you live this every day too. The more we can break down trade barriers, the more we can make trade move fluidly around the world and remove some of the uncertainty that is involved in moving product globally. I think that the better off we'll all be. I mean, it'll make commerce better, it'll make our mission easier. So many things would improve, and it's one of the key challenges we face. In fact, you were looking for silver linings. I'd say one of the silver linings, and I'm sure there's more out there, but one of the silver linings I see is with this COVID-19, you do see some of those barriers coming down. You see it becoming, countries are more open now to aid, obviously, and in the U.S. it's more open to import of aid from other locations. So we're seeing some of those barriers come down, and hopefully we all learn from that, and we can make that happen on a more continuous basis in the future.
Great point there. And Enrique, like I mentioned, I'd love for you to weigh in. And, you know, you're living a lot of that right now, you and the Vector team. What are you tracking more than others right now?
Yeah, no, and we've been working on this, and similar to Randy and Medshare, like they ship masks to China when the virus hit China. So they've been tracking this for 6 months, and so have we, kind of shipping around the world. And the one thing that we're currently seeing is that the U.S. is still needing a lot of help, and everyone's trying to help them. But then the virus it's slowly shifting to Latin America and Africa, and I think those two areas of the world are going to be hit next and maybe last in this pandemic. And so, as Randy mentioned, we've been fielding calls from all over, and I think we're expecting to do that again sometime soon, especially Mexico, Bolivia, some countries in Latin America, and after that it will be a call from Ghana and Nigeria and Africa. So it's just, we still have a couple, hopefully less than a few months, but it's still developing, and I really think that this is still not over, and we have to kind of keep together and make sure that that there's trust in the system. That's right. The one thing that I think we all need to promote.
Great point.
Trusting a little bit more in each other, and just being a little bit more transparent about why we're doing things, and then just getting them done.
Great point. Randy, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to ask you a question that wasn't part of my initial plan, but you know, talking with you and getting to know you a little better, there's just a sense of calm in your perspective right now. And I got to ask you, if you had a couple of things, given all of your leadership experience and your journey, if you had to offer a couple of things that for other organizational leaders to kind of keep in mind as we go through these uncertain times, what would those couple of tips look like?
Oh, wow. I guess one that comes to mind right off is, you know, stay focused on your purpose and your mission. To me, that's always been a guiding light, if you will, is you know, we need to understand our mission, we need to understand our purpose, and then we need to stay focused on how do we get that accomplished. It helps you prioritize the reuse of resources. It helps you prioritize both people and physical resources, and it helps you focus on any uncertainties that come along. One of the things, you know, all of us in the supply chain practice, if you will, we deal with uncertainty, right? That's what we do every day.
Right.
Is we try to minimize uncertainty, we try to predict uncertainty, and we try to manage through uncertainty. And, you know, one of the things that I'd say is key going forward is this is a new and different challenge for us, and we need to continue to keep our eye on where we need to be, what the most important priority is, and focus what we have at our disposal to accomplish that.
Yeah, the power of focus is such, it cannot be overstated during challenging and uncertain times. And I also like what you put. Yeah, supply chain folks are used to trying to peer around corners and hit curveballs and carry out, you know, problem solve, all the unexpected. It kind of comes with the professional. I like how you put that there. Okay, so Randy, before we bring Enrique and Monica back in to talk about a couple of initiatives that the Vector team is leading, you've already kind of shared a couple of different things that where folks can learn more about Medshare, but let's make sure that it's medshare.org, medshare.org is the website. Yep. And where else can folks learn more and potentially get engaged?
Well, social media, we're, like I mentioned, we're at, on Facebook, we're at Medshare Mission. And Instagram, we're at Medshare Official. And Twitter, we're at Medshare. So we're pretty active in all three areas of social media, as well as, you know, we keep people up to date on our website. And if you want to come volunteer, our website is where we interact initially with groups. It's where they come request times and dates. If you want to provide a donation of supplies or equipment, again, come to our website. or obviously you could reach out to me personally. I'd be happy to talk to you. But we welcome any engagement around the global health space and supplies and equipment that we can. So,
outstanding.
Yep.
Really appreciate what you're doing. Thanks so much for carving some time out and joining us here on Supply Chain Now. And stay tight as we wrap up the interview here. Don't go anywhere just yet, Randy. And big thanks, too, to your colleague, Nancy Hunter, over at Medshare for helping facilitate today's conversation.
Absolutely. Nancy is fantastic.
You bet. Okay, so I want to bring Enrique back into the conversation here. Enrique, it's tough to do it justice in just a couple of minutes because Vector is involved in so many different initiatives, but what's one or two critical initiatives that the Vector team is leading right now that folks should hear about?
Yes, no, thanks, Scott. So I'll talk about one general and then just one very specific that I'm very passionate about. The general comment that I wanted to make is we've been working with different companies and organizations trying to help in any way we can. We've been dealing with this pandemic since the beginning when we actually shipped masks into China, and now we're trying to bring them desperately back to the U.S. and some other parts of the world. And so one thing that we did is we launched a response team that with people not only here in the U.S., Mexico, Chile, and other parts in Latin America, but also with a specialized team in China that's helping us go and vet different suppliers, vet different sources. They will go to the manufacturing facilities, take pictures, take videos, interview and double check that all the products are FDA approved. They have the certifications in place. They have the CE. They have all the different quality control guidances that other countries have stipulated for them to be imported efficiently. So the first thing is, if anyone out there needs help, either sourcing or shipping or both, please feel free to reach out to us. We are really trying to just bring some clarity and just openness and transparency to the whole deal-making process that we currently see. The market's tough. It's been challenging. There's a lot of, I think, corruption and inefficiencies. A lot of people claiming to do things that they probably can't do or they weren't doing for long, like a lot of manufacturing facilities that were making umbrellas a couple of weeks ago, now they're making KN95 masks. So there's a lot of noise out there, and so we want to help with that. And then the other initiative that we're launching and I'm really excited about is we're partnering with Love Beyond Walls, Terrence Lester, and it's an organization that helps homeless people in Atlanta and all over the country, and we are trying to help raise money to bring 100,000 masks for the homeless. We got some samples this morning. I'm really excited about it. I'm going to send you a picture and show you before the interview started, and we're really happy about this. I think that's something that's really going to help people that really need it, because one thing that we sometimes, and it happened to me, so we forget, is when all these different social distancing rules started, everyone's used stay home, but well, some people don't have homes, right? And it's just even the way that the mandates are written, it's just offensive and wrong and just heartbreaking, because they literally say, if you don't have a home or a homeless, well, then none of these applies to you. And you're like, well, yes, but that's not the answer. How are we going to help these people that unfortunately don't have homes? So that's one thing that I'm really excited about, and I really look forward to working with Terrence, because he's an amazing individual.
Outstanding. And I think we're working on putting together a live stream featuring Vector and Terrence and learn more about that.
I think we're gonna interview him in a couple more weeks, which should be interesting and fun too.
Outstanding. It's the things in our blind spots during especially challenging and unique times that can't get enough attention. So really appreciate what you're doing and the Vector team is doing. How can folks learn more about Vector, Enrique?
Yeah, so you can send me an email at enrique.alvarez@vectorgl.com. You can go to our webpage at www.vectorgl.com, or just reach us out on Instagram as well. And I would like to give you a opportunity for Monica to introduce herself as well, because she's been very helpful and amazing kind of coordinating some of these interviews for the series Logistics with Purpose. And that's another way of really getting in touch with us through her. So, Moni?
Thanks, Enrique. Well, you can reach me in my email too. It's monica.roesch@vectorgl.com or on LinkedIn as Monica Aurora Roche Davila.
Outstanding. Monica, really appreciate what you're doing to help us facilitate these conversations like the one we've had here today with Randy Strang. And thanks so much. So Enrique, Monica, thanks so much to our listeners. You can learn more about Vector at vectorgl.com. You can learn more about Medshare at medshare.org. And of course, we'll have those links in the show notes of today's episode. Thanks again to our listeners. Thanks for joining us in on this conversation we've been having with Randy Strang, Chief Operating Officer with Medshare, a global humanitarian aid organization doing big things across the world in so many different ways. That happens to be headquartered here in Atlanta. Randy, thanks so much for your time.
Absolutely, Scott. Thanks again for having me.
You bet. Stay safe and all the best to you and your team. Thank you, Enrique and Monica. All the best to you and the Vector team. To our audience, be sure to check out a wide variety of industry thought leadership at supplychainnowradio.com. Find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. On behalf of our entire team here, Scott Luton wishing you a successful week ahead. Stay safe. Don't panic. We're going to break through any time now, but please do follow the expert advice and precautions that have been distributed by your local healthcare entities. And know this, brighter days lie ahead. We'll see you next time on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.